every time in business strategy or business mechanics or business modeling or profit, like there's one thing that kept coming up every single time, which was pricing. So I just paid attention to that and just said, oh, you know what? Everybody actually understands pricing. To me, it's part of the philosophy, which is everything is downstream from pricing, right? It's literally the only thing that creates revenue, right? A sale doesn't create revenue, but a sale with a price creates revenue.
You're listening to the Bold Women in Business podcast, the show for women who are building something that actually matters and who are ready to stop hiding behind the polished and perfect and start showing up as their bold, magnetic, human AF selves. I'm Rachel Honeyman, your guide to finding your true magic and putting it front and center in your brand. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. There's one part of business more than any other that feels completely random to most entrepreneurs, and that is pricing. How the hell do you price your services? It feels like something you just kind of make up. You maybe look up some of your competitors online, you Google or you ask ChatGPT or Claude or whoever, and you say, what am I supposed to charge for the services that I offer? And it is a completely random number that is based on nothing to do with you, right? It's just like something random. And you just throw this number out to potential clients when you have sales calls and you just hope that something is going to stick. If you're nodding along, first of all, you are not alone. I'm telling you, this is such a common problem. I ran into this problem for a very long time. I would say that I still struggle with it to some degree. But the conversation that I'm sharing with you today is such an integral part of me being able to navigate my own pricing. It has been an important part of me navigating my own pricing. And also it is going to just completely demystify this whole conversation around pricing and what it means for your business. I'm talking today with my business coach, who I've mentioned many times, Peter Giordano III. He is just a complete pricing whiz. This is like his area. But as you'll see in this conversation, pricing is not this thing that lives in a bubble on an island separate from everything else. It is just part of the entirety of your business. And so when I work with Peter on my business, yes, we talk about pricing, but there's so much more related to operations and business strategy and kind of the whole picture. He's really, really good at looking at the whole picture, starting through the lens of pricing. So I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. It's so valuable for anyone who is offering services and feels confused about how to price your services. And I hope you get a ton out of this conversation. And after you listen, go reach out to Peter because he is just a joy to talk to, first of all, and he's going to open your eyes in a way that you would not even believe. I promise. I've been on the other end of that conversation many, many, many times. So enjoy. I am so thrilled to welcome the man, the myth, the legend. You've heard me talk about Peter, I don't know, probably 10 times on this podcast by now. So I'm really excited to have you here finally to share your wisdom. You want to just let everyone know who you are in case this is people's first episode and they have not heard me talk about you 100 times by now.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. 100 times is totally acceptable. That works in my world. All right, let's see. How do I describe myself after that intro? Hi, my name's Peter. All right. I've been on the show 0 times, but have been talked about many times. Most of what we do or what we work with or are working on is something in the realm of pricing, operations, and business strategy, right? 3 big words or 3 big phrases. But I kind of try to link the 3 together because in a business, right, all the systems work together. So it's not just isolated. That's much of the conversations in which we'll probably have today, what you and I have on occasion, and what I'm actually having with other individuals as well. So think of it that way. Pricing, ops, and business strategy all wrapped together in a wonderful little bow.
Awesome. We will kind of focus on the pricing side today, but like you said, it's all connected. So, so I mean, I'll just give a little other context here. If anyone hasn't heard me talk about you a million times, you see that the number is going up. Like it started at 10 and then 100 and then a million. So we're just, you know me, I love hyperbole. So, So I talk a lot about the business coaches that I work with, and I have worked with many over, the 3.5 years I've been in business. And Peter has been just a really essential part of helping me kind of leap from one level to the next. And at every stage when I'm like ready to move up, he's the first person that I talk to. And I want to kind of start by asking, like, how did you become known as the pricing guy? Like you do a lot, you have a lot of knowledge about a lot of things. But I think you're kind of known as the pricing expert. How did that come to be?
By accident a little bit. Not accident. Let's change that word, which is maybe with intention. I didn't start out in pricing, right? I started in 2019. Here's a little bit of a story. I will get to your answer, but here's a little bit of a story. I started in 2019, right? In the world of entrepreneurship, doing what everybody does. I want to do anything for everyone, for anyone, and whatever way possible sort of deal. Like, it's just natural. I think I give a lot of credit to those who are very targeted at first, but it was kind of just everything. And then after a little while, I really found that, hey, I'm good in this area of business strategy. Another, right, really hard framing thing doesn't really make much sense. But every time in business strategy or business mechanics or business modeling or profit, like, there's one thing that kept coming up every single time, which was pricing. So I just paid attention to that and just said, oh, you know what? Everybody actually understands pricing. To me, it's part of the philosophy, which is everything is downstream from pricing, right? It's literally the only thing that creates revenue, right? A sale doesn't create revenue, but a sale with a price creates revenue, right? In that sense. So, like, once I found that it was the most independent variable and that everybody was talking about it and that everybody understood what it meant, I just said, you know what? There's something here that I can apply my lens and frame and business strategy around. So I start with pricing. And the truth is it doesn't end with pricing, but most of the time in which I talk about things, it's know me as the pricing individual first, because until then, I need to earn your trust to talk about all the other mechanics behind that. So I won't say that I do everything. I'll say that I start with pricing.
Yeah. There's like two things I want to pick on there. One is not actually related. We won't go down this rabbit hole. I just want to kind of point out for the listeners the real benefit in niching. And there's a lot of talk around niching, and I probably should do a whole episode around this topic because it's not so simple. It's not so cut and dry, but you basically pick this niche or I guess it kind of, you wound up in this niche and this is what you're known as, but you wind up doing a whole range of other things that are related to that. So I think that that's a really powerful example for people who are like terrified of niching and think that it's going to limit them. Like, it's just a way for people to hang their hat and like say like, okay, I know what you do. And like, I'm going to come to you for that. And then, it might wind up going in other directions.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to say about that?
Of course. You know me. I always have perspective.
I know.
No, I think about this all the time. I think about a lot of thoughts all the time, and I will always go down rabbit holes. So anybody who wants to go down a rabbit hole with me, please, you're invited. The thing with the niching or specialization, whatever you want to call it, is like, it is okay to be good at multiple things. It is, right? How I have viewed it in the world is when you meet somebody and you do good work, they want you to do more good work with them. And from an economies of scale and scope purposes, you're probably better off working with a person who is pretty good in a few areas. But the thing is for those who don't know you, it's very hard to tell somebody that you're good at multiple things. Mm-hmm. Even though they say, yeah, it's likely, it's hard. So it's easier to introduce yourself, the welcome mat, right, as one thing, build trust in that one thing, and then opens the door for the three other rooms in which you can provide that value. And I think that's more of the framing in which I would say for niching, which is focus on the one thing for really the people who don't know you, particularly if you're working with smaller, like 1-person teams, 2-person teams. And then you can build that trust and that what I will call replacement value over time. So it's a perspective. And I really like that multiple people have different perspectives on this.
Yeah, love it. I think the piece that I want to come back to, which is you said people understand pricing, but do they? Do they really? Like, do people really understand pricing?
I think it's what I would say. I'll rephrase that, which is people understand the concept of what a price is, We know what groceries are, right? Rent, whatever it is, fixing a boiler, whatever it means. We know the price of something. It's tangible. It's in our wallets or in our budgets. It's understandable. The concept of pricing your services becomes a little bit less fuzzy, but the reality is pricing is a lot more tangible and real than, say, strategy or even the phrases like market, right? There's an association with it because it's noticeable and real in real life.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I think that, I mean, probably you see this all the time, but I see it all the time also. And like, I don't do the pricing side of things. I always send them to you. And when people need help with pricing, they're like, people just don't know how to price their services. Like, so we're probably going to get into like a little bit more of nitty gritty at some point in this episode, I'm sure, because you love going down those rabbit holes. So we're going to go there. But I think let's talk high level first. Like, what are the biggest, let's say, like myths? Like, what are the biggest myths you run into that people, ideas that people have around pricing, or things that they get wrong around pricing?
That there is a right price. I think there's many correct or directionally correct pricing for somebody. There's probably more wrong pricing than there is, but I don't think you're ever going to find one single price. The same individual cloned, right, in every aspect could have two different prices in almost every, and it'd be okay. So I don't want it to always say that there's one right price, because there's a number of goals, there's a number of outcomes, there's always a number of nuances. The market is a variable. So I would say number one is that there isn't a right price. So I try to remove that also. The other thing too that I say sometimes is that screw the market a little bit. So people will say, well, what does the market bear for this price? And I say, screw the market. In reality, when we're operating at the scale in which we're operating, we have like such a small world, and that a lot of the people who think that they might be competing against other people, in a lot of times, the buyer on the other side really isn't even like comparing you against somebody else. Don't get me wrong. There are comparisons. There is competition, but you're more likely to compete against their status quo than somebody else. Right. Yeah. And so it's like sometimes screw the market a little bit and just really focus on framing your value and your different, because when they have to go and find a competitor as well or somebody else, that's even friction, more time and more choice paradox. And so sometimes screw the market. It's pricing based on you, your services, and your client is more applicable.
No, and especially because, like, I mean, I hear this all the time. Like, people come to me and they're like, okay, I want help building a website. And they're like, well, I've spoken with 3 other people and the prices that I'm getting are so vastly different from each other. Like, I don't even know where to start. And I always tell them, I'm like that. Yes, you have a budget. Like, that you have a budget, you know what you can afford. Like, that is important, but it's going to come down to many other factors than just who's the cheapest. Because if that's the decisions that you're making as as someone hiring a service provider, like, you're going to wind up in pretty hot water at some point. And I love that I just used the word hot water. It's clearly on my mind. I was just telling Peter before we got on that my boiler is broken and I am showering in cold showers at the moment. So I guess I'm thinking about hot water, dreaming about it. But yeah, I think that that's not like the smartest way to make decisions as a business owner that's hiring service providers, and or even as an individual. Like, even when you're hiring someone to do something around your house, like, hiring the cheapest person is we all know this intuitively. Like, that's not the smartest move most of the time. You have to find the person who's like within your budget, but actually is going to deliver on the things that you want. And so I think that on the other side, it makes sense. Like, the market is also so variable that it's like, it becomes really almost meaningless at a certain point to price based on that.
Yeah, a lot of times, even the people who are pricing aren't looking, even though we say we look at our competition, we don't know enough about our competition for us to actually understand why the pricing is behind it. So there's a lot of variables, and sometimes it's more of just a relationship-based transaction. And there's nuances, and it's trust and all of those elements. So
Yeah.
That's just the second one, just the second of probably many myths in which I would go down the rabbit hole for.
Yeah. I think a very common thing that people hear is like charge your worth, right? This is like a very common phrase that is pretty vague. And I think well, I'll let you talk about it. Like what are your thoughts on that phrase, and what does it actually mean?
Yeah. Value is relative, right? So the person on the other end of your services is going to be the one that dictates your worth and your value to them. And it's really in the circumstance. So your entire worth to everybody in your market or your area is really amorphous. Like that doesn't really mean anything because you don't know what is valuable to them yet. So I think the value concept is a little bit one-to-one basis, right? Mm-hmm. It's based on the circumstance. It's based on the buyer or the client or the prospect in which you're talking to. Because if your services provide a $10 million outcome or a $1 million outcome for the same thing, right? Now that's value-based pricing or some level of value-based pricing. But in the grand scheme of things, that's different, right? That's different forms of value. So charge your worth. Worth is very internal and philosophical and personal, right? And so there's probably some deep work in which you have to go on for understanding what charge your worth actually means. But the phrase itself doesn't really make much sense in the grand scheme of things. It's really more on the individual, the situation, the circumstance, the elements of that relationship that will dictate what worth actually means.
Yeah. And I think that's really tied to this idea of, I think really where that phrase winds up coming in is that so many entrepreneurs, especially solopreneurs, and, we could probably talk about like whether this is true of men and women both, but I certainly am seeing the female side of things. I think it's very, very common that people just undercharge, right? Like they are just not charging enough. But I think that's where we kind of like maybe need to get a little under the hood. Like, what does that actually mean to be undercharging versus charging what you should be charging? And, kind of getting out of the abstract, like, and the what you're worth, because I think that's not very concrete. Like, yeah. Let's like get into a little bit of the brass tacks. Like, what does this actually mean?
Well, undercharging and charging your worth are two different, like they can be two different things if we're going to split those. So undercharging, we see this a lot because one, it could just be confidence, right? Two, it could just be like you haven't given yourself permission to get no's, right? Is you're like, hey, every single time I pitch my services, I want to try to get a yes. And that's true, right? Of course it is. But in reality, you also have to do the opposite, right? Inverse thinking is also valuable thinking, which is I have to give myself the permission to get a no. Because that's a commitment in doing and delivering on the promise. And so if you give yourself the permission to get enough no's, then somebody, if you've done your marketing and branding and advertise, whatever it is that you want to do to attract potential buyers, then you should have enough chances to define the value with that individual and to price appropriately. So I think sometimes when it's undercharging, it's either A, not understanding the economics of their own business, right? The inside supply side. And then on the outside, the external version of it is not getting enough in understanding what it is that the buyer is actually valuing, what's in it for them, what do they actually care about in the circumstance. And so I think it's really just more of talking. So the undercharging comes with probably a lack of information, some version of lack of confidence, the lack of not permitting yourself to get more no's, and maybe not understanding the business economics that you have or the goals in which you have or the way in which you physically operate inside of your business. So charging is just a byproduct of it.
Mm-hmm. Is there a formula or, I don't know if or some rule of thumb of kind of like, what is the right number of no's to be getting percentage wise? Like if you're having sales calls, and I know you said this to me at one point, like, if I'm getting a lot of yeses, like, or, a certain number percentage of yeses, like that is a really good indicator that it's time to raise my prices. So can you talk through, like, is there a good rule of thumb for that?
There's not a great rule of thumb, because what I don't want is, as I'm talking about the relationship between, it's circumstantial, right? Your buyer, you have different buyers. Some people who are listening are going to be selling to what I call budgets. Some people sell to wallets, and I can explain that in just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that is different is because for somebody who has like a really deep, super deep relationship with somebody, and that's their business model, they may want they want to hire like yeses because it's very taxing on the sales process to get no's. Somebody who is in the more volume game, it might be okay to get more no's because the sales cycle might be shorter. Like it might be a 1-call close or a 2-call close. So it's very dependent upon what I might think about as the sales cycle, right? How intensive, how costly, how frictionful is the sales process and or the marketing that leads up to it. And that might dictate that. So there's not one rule of thumb, but there certainly is some variation of a formula. Like 30% means that for every 7 no's, it costs 7 hours for those no's. And if you multiply it by whatever, I'm just like kind of making this up in the grand scheme of things, but there is a formula if you want to add math to it. But what I would say is the framework is think about the sales friction and the process in the cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, someone comes to you and they are starting from scratch, or they've just never really given thought to their pricing. They've just kind of made up numbers, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs are doing that. They're just kind of like slapping a number on something and like hoping it works. How do you actually go through the process of helping people set prices that make sense for them?
I'll go through an exercise. My whole thing is frame breaking, right? I have to find a way to break the current frame in which you have so that you can reframe it in a different way. Not only reframing the value to your client, like what does it actually matter, but also reframing the value to yourself. So even if you haven't gone through the process of pricing, I go through it. It's like, can you make $1 million? And it's literally just an exercise, which is, can you make $1 million with the services that you have, with the pricing structure in which you believe you want, with the administrative costs and the sales time? And it's literally just walking through the unit economics of the service to see what is the maximum revenue that you can make. Now, I just use $1 million because it's a very cool term, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of smaller business solos, it's really hard to get to $1 million, but can you make $1 million? And so for me to tell somebody you're undercharging or you're overcharging, that's me telling them. I have to let them see it. So one thing I will walk through is I walk through this process, whether it's in a Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, something cool, right? It's cool to me, right? I love spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets.
Really,
cool
really
Let's be
nerdy,
very clear. I like to say I use them to make the future wiggle because I want to show decisions in real time. And so if I can do that and I can create an aha moment that says, okay, I see that I can only make this much. And I will see your emotional reaction, and I will bend emotional and intuition aligned with logic to help them make the decision, which is why I go back to this concept from before that there is no one right answer, because it really has to set with the individual, right? Who is actually pitching and selling and pricing the services. So can I make $1 million is the process, and is looking at the business from the inside, the internal mechanics, the ops, time and admin, the pricing, how many clients you would actually have, and being real about the services in which you deliver.
Yeah. I think one thing that was very eye-opening about the work that we've done together, especially like our initial work together, was really looking at the, revenue versus expenses. And I think that is a piece that many entrepreneurs just like, even if you're keeping your books, which hopefully you are, but like you really just look at that revenue number, right? You're like, how much money did I bring in? But there's this whole like other side of the story. And so I'd love to hear you kind of talk through like where that plays a role and how people should be thinking about that.
So I'll ask a question, which is not to you, but just in general. I'll say, do you care most about revenue, margin, or price or profit? Mm-hmm. Even if we haven't had the conversation, I'm very curious, because by the end of our conversations or our work together, the answer might change, whatever it may be. But I think they are different, right? Revenue matters to scaling businesses, selling businesses. It might, right? Profit also matters. But I mentioned this notion of budget and wallet before.
Yes.
And I think profit is basically right pocket, left pocket, right? For our businesses, the smaller you are, it feels more like the business feels more like, it's putting money into our wallet to make more decisions. And so like profit tends to matter. And I just want to show people that, look, you're in this business to maintain a profit so that you can keep playing this game. There's nothing bad with revenue. Obviously, revenue is really helpful in the grand scheme of things, but it's also the space in between, margin, right? What is the revenue minus the cost to deliver your services? And that is what I would just generally frame as your margin before any other business expense, because that is the wiggle room. That is the number in which allows you the autonomy to make a decision. Do I want to put this in my pocket, or do I want to put it back in the business for something else to grow the revenue? And so revenue has its key value. Profit has its key value, but it's the margin in the middle, which I always say that gives you the most autonomy to look at. So I want individuals to look at all three and to make the decision themselves to say, which one do you care about most? Because then once you figure out which one you care about most, we can optimize the business or structure the business or the model, the pricing around what it is that you care about most, because you have an internal scorecard yourself, and we need to make sure that you follow your internal scorecard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been a very this is like why I send people to you all the time, because I think it's a very individualized process. Like it really is very much based on yes, the finances of it, but it's the finances. Like we all know this. Like there's such an emotional piece of this. There's what type of life you want to build, what your business actually exists for. Like there's all these other factors that play a role in how you answer all those questions. And like if someone is just looking at the numbers without taking all that into consideration, like they're going to miss the mark, because you can't actually separate them.
Yeah. I tell people a lot of times that most individuals who start a business start it around some version of a craft, right? And then they build the business around it. Ironically, what I did is I said, I just want to be in business. So I'm just going to build a business to be in the game of business. And I say it sometimes as the business of thinking, right? I'm just helping people really think and be strategic about the decisions, which is interesting because now as I'm talking about it, I'm explaining it and I'm not saying the word pricing at all, which is, so we're going to go back to it. That anybody who's been listening is going to see that transformation happen because you've already walked through the front door. But that's really it. And so I just want individuals really to find that mark, which is they thought of themselves as a craftsperson or a service delivery person or whatever it may be, to then all of a sudden think of themselves as, oh, I'm a business owner who happens to do this thing. And it's at that shift that is really, really remarkable. And it's that where the decisions are made.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. What are the things that people need to understand about their businesses? I think this is very related to what we were just talking about. Like, what are the things that they need to understand about their business before you can even like touch pricing?
Well, I would say that's a trick question because I always want people to look at pricing. I also have the concept of starting with price, which is look at price before, not at the end. However, I'm playing your game. Let's go. I'm going to answer the question. The smaller you are in your business, one person, look at time. I look at time. That's what I would want somebody. And what I mean by time is capacity. And there are revenue generating activities. There are non-revenue generating activities. And then there are like semi-revenue generating activities, right? How long does it take you from start to finish to fulfill your services? And how much admin is in there? How much like downtime is in there? How much like delay or how much friction is on your calendar? So if I do have to say this, the one thing I would want people to look at is like their capacity and understanding how much time and how much attention is going into their business before even actually looking at the finances, because finances and the business mechanics and the profit is very, very important. But the smaller you are, right? 1, 2, 3, 10 person, like time is that's the factor. Pay attention to that and you'll see a lot of things happen.
Yeah. And I know that I'm the worst at tracking my time. And every time Peter and I like sit and break down the numbers, he's like, so how long does this take? And I'm like, I don't know. I still don't know the answer to that. So this is a work in progress for me too.
Which is funny. I will say this, which is you and I will always talk about the concept of tracking time. And I'm always like, just like, give me an estimate, right? Because like I definitely am not the individual who's sitting here tracking like to the hour, but I find that people are pretty good when they get really into it to have some proxy of a correct number. And then what happens is when they say it, then they watch and be like, oh, that was longer than I thought, or that was way shorter than I thought. And so simply by talking about it creates the awareness of it, because I think it takes a lot of time to actually track your time. And you and I have talked about this, which is, I don't want you to do it to the hour. I want you to have a good understanding of it. And once you have a good proxy of it, that's one of my favorite words, right? You can actually make those decisions on the back end.
So I think you kind of touched on this with that exercise you talked about with like, how would you get to $1 million? But like when someone is going through the process of pricing out their services, like I think many people recommend doing this kind of like working backwards, right? Like figuring out how much money you actually want in your pocket, figuring out your margins, figuring out your like all of that, and then working backwards from there. Like, how much time does it take? And like, can you just like talk through like very high level? Like we don't need to like pull out the calculator, but like just kind of like so people have a sense of what process they could go through to price out their services in an intelligent way.
All right, let's go. We're going two ways. I'm going to start with the client in mind. So some people call it value-based pricing, some version of value-based pricing. Let's just call it modified version of that, which is forget about what it costs you to deliver. Just focus in on really concretely understanding the value in which you're going to provide. And being able not to only take that, like draw that out, but to be able to frame it appropriately that this is the number in which is going to create this value and that how much you contribute to it. So let me just give an example, which is what if during a 3-part discovery call, right? I have somebody who their goal is to reduce risk, right? People buy services for one of 4 options. Right? They want to save time. They want to make money, elevate status. They want to reduce risk. So let's give this example, which is I have somebody who wants to reduce risk in their business. And so what they want to do is they want more certainty, right? What's the value of that to them? Well, let's make it up and say it was $1 million, right? We go in the process of saying, hey, I'm going to save X, Y, and Z. It's actually going to come out to $1 million in the bottom line. And I would say if we can solve X, Y, and Z, then it would create $1 million worth of value. Great. Now I'll work together. Could you do this on your own? Absolutely. I could do this on my own, they might say. And so it's like, that might take 5 years to do. So I can reduce your risk and your certainty to say, we can shorten it to a year. You have access to me and we can find this and we can cut out the solutions which don't work. That would be great. That's going to both save me money, make me money, and it's going to reduce my risk and so forth. So this is a way in which I might price by valuing what the client values and then backing into it that way. Right. So what is my percentage, right? Maybe it's your time is going to help contribute to 20% of that. And you know what? Maybe there's a risk of it not working. So maybe I back into maybe it's 15%. So that's one way of pricing the client, which is 15% of their million could be $150,000 process. And you together align on this value creation process. And effectively, if I could do this for you, would you pay $150,000? That is a way of not creating the scope, but customize and value pricing. So this works more for me who I don't have a standardized set of services, right? It might be more in the customized version, or I do a few different things. This is a proxy for what you could do, but that's how you could go client to you to be able to focus on value and then set the price. All right. The alternative is also true. Let's take a standardized productized set of services, right? You could say, hey, I'm actually going to do this from the ground up, right? I know how much time it takes for me to do my websites, or I know how long it takes me to do my social media writing, whatever it may be, is I know how much time. You can go this way. Again, there's no right answer. I want you to be able to price it how you want to price it. So I would work with you to say, if this is how you want to price it and this is what makes sense in your mind, let's find the most optimal way of going about it. Again, no right answer. And so you can start with time, right? What is the time in which it takes over here? How many clients could you actually have in that time? What is your financial goal? And be able to go through the process and say, well, if you want all of this, and if 10% of your time is on admin and 30% of your time is on business development because you need to give yourself permission to get no, then you have this left to be able to sell your services, and it takes this amount of time. And that's a pure math formula. So for you to make your goals, it must equal this, which means you need to find people or buyers who are willing to value the price at which you want to pay 5, 10x and so forth. So it still goes to the client, but this is a pullback and this is a push forward. Both are right, but both have varying factors. So that's a high level look at how you can go about it with a little bit of math associated with it.
Yeah. No, I think that was great. I think the key there is, again, knowing your time, right? Like knowing how much generally how much of your time is spent on the different parts of your business, because without that, it's really hard to figure out what pricing makes sense.
Yeah. And this is a trend with me personally, like this is also a philosophy, which is a lot of the things that we are talking about. Like I believe there's so much nuance in the situation and the relationship and the client. Like it's really hard to ignore that. And so even when we go back to some of these rules of thumb, they are broad sweeping. And so it's very hard to get sometimes specific. And I say this to you, I say this to other people too, it's really hard to get specific sometimes without knowing the situation. And I really want to dig even deeper into the nuances and get under the hood and get really, really clear to be able to even offer some version of advice. And this is a wonderful example of that. You and I have this relationship that where we get to dive into your business itself. And so it can be very, very specific. But this is totally a lesson learned that took me 7, 8 years to realize, to pretend like I could give all those advice. But it's just like, I love the nuance of business in this game because it teaches us and it humbles us so quickly.
Yes, it really, really does. And I think that one of the you maybe didn't even mean to touch on this, but I think it is another myth. Probably you'll tell me if you agree, but you talked about how your services are pretty customized and they're not productized, and I think that the general rule of thumb out there is you have to productize your services. And if you don't productize your services, you're leaving money on the table and it's really a bad way to do things. And I think that probably this is just another one of those rules of thumb that really don't apply to everyone. It's just going to depend on your business and your values and your goals and all of that.
Yes, that I'm going to go down this rabbit hole because you've invited me, and I think this is really important though for individuals to listen. Which is, if you want to be in the volume game and you want to churn over and you want to just deliver on a specific outcome, and I'm going to give you this, then maybe productize this is perfectly fine, right? You're delivering the same service, you're focusing on optimization. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a preference to your business model, and if you want to do that, then do that. Then there's fully customized, which is, hey, what's the outcome you want? And then I will just figure out what the scope is in order to, now there's some customization, but there's also some hey, I know these 3 areas. So if it's pricing and optimization, it's not I can just give you everything. I'm not a full service agency. Then there's probably in the middle, in which I might call tailored. Some people call standardized, right? Which is, I have some bumpers on the bowling alley, but I'm somewhere in between. It's a little bit of productization, a little bit of customization, but I would probably call it more tailored to the situation. Mm-hmm. All 3 are fine business models. They all work in the world, right? Consulting, advisory. It's a preference. And you just want to make sure that you fit your preference to the structure, and then you fit the structure to your business model and mechanics, and just focus on that and get those right and optimized.
Yeah. And I think that it is a really, really important thing for people to be aware of, especially because I work with a lot of creative entrepreneurs who the idea of kind of sticking themselves in a box is really, really, doesn't sit well with them. And so the idea of productizing what they offer doesn't feel like the right way to go about things. So but they're being told that, right? They're being told that's the only way to do things. And it's not the only way to do things. There are other ways to do things. So, yeah.
I'm going to go down that and say, I just recently wrote something about how advisory, I use the word advisory a lot, right? I think advice functions more like startup portfolio, which is we all think that our advice and our consultations have equal value, right? Just like we think our days are just as good as the next. We have highs, lows, and all this. I think there's always one piece of advice or 2 pieces of advice that tower over the rest. That some are losers, some are winners, but then there's 1 or 2. And so like in the grand scheme of things, like same how it applies to other individuals, which is like your business model is going to fit you. Your preferences are going to fit you, right? It's going to fit you. And so I just want to pay attention to what's the like one or two things that move the needle, whether it's a decision, whether it's advice, whatever it may be. It's interesting. It's like one or two things are going to tower over the rest. Pick your preferences.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. If someone kind of like figures out, okay, I need to raise my prices, what is your advice? We'll come back to that advice.
Nice.
What is your advice for how to kind of roll that out with their existing clients versus new clients? I think this is something that people are really scared of. Like, I'm really scared to raise my prices because I'm going to lose my existing clientele. How do you recommend navigating that?
Totally fair feeling. Anybody who feels this, like, you're not alone. When it comes to new clients, like, don't worry about them. The reason I'm saying don't worry about them is they've never bought from you before, right? They are all new. Your pricing is pretty much all new. They're not sitting on the computer, probably like waiting for you to hit your sale or whatever it may be. In the grand scheme of things, like, they are new buyers. Their attention is elsewhere. They live in their own world. So there's no such thing as raising prices on somebody who never bought before, because your price is the first time they are actually purchasing. So raising prices really is to your second point, which is on an existing client. So then I would ask is like, what type of service do you offer? If it's customized, then again, it doesn't really matter, right? If it's productized or it's recurring, some people will say like a retainer model, or it's more of a subscription model, right? I buy this monthly service each time. What's the appropriate way? Be human, right? How would you want it to be done to you? You're going to get new people coming in, right? Your business people are going to fall off. You're going to get new people come in. They're going to get the higher price. Work with the individual to set and give them well enough advance notice, which is whether you think it's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. Like, I've had competing thoughts on this. Like, I've even been contradictory to myself. I would tell them up front, and then you two together come up with terms so that you can continue the relationship, because it does cost you more money also to have to find somebody new and fill the gap at the same time if you don't have an inflow of people coming in. So I'm much more in the camp when it comes to raising prices is here's the new rate. Don't blame it on expenses or increasing, right? Don't say it's I have raising costs, so I'm going to put the cost on you. Don't do that. That's a you problem, not a them problem. Like, if you're raising prices, there's a reason why. It's probably because you're better. Your value is increased. You've established more what I would call replacement value. You are harder to replace, because if they have to go and replace somebody else, it costs them a lot of money to get up to speed. There is a value associated with it. So I'm raising my price because I know more. Show it as a positive and reframe that value as a positive. Give the person the appropriate level of time, have a conversation with them. And particularly if you're in the relationship business, it's a relationship, it's two-way, right? But don't go too long. Like, if you're 6 months, that's pretty long. 3 months, better. 2 months, fine. Have a conversation.
Yeah. No, I mean, I absolutely. The only piece of that I'm not sure. My instinct would be to like not actually feel like you have to explain it, because I think everyone understands that prices go up, and so there is a certain level of confidence in just saying like, my prices are going up as of January 1st. I wanted to give you a heads up. I wanted to have a conversation about it. Great. And like, not even going into the because I think then you wind up backing yourself into a corner a little bit, where they can be like, oh, but actually how do you know it's worth that much? Or how do you know, like, there's at least open the door for that.
I love it. And I would say there's two philosophies on it. Some people feel that, they want to give the reason because there's a fear of judgment. That's fine. Like, if you want to say because and go for it, absolutely. You have to give yourself permission to get no's still, because, right, that may be the thing. But what you're saying too is absolutely true, which is I'm stating it as a fact, right? It's a truth. This is what it is. And that's what I'm going to do. That's the number in which I'm going to price at. And I like that.
Yeah. I mean, like, just look at, not that any of us are Netflix, but like, you just get an email saying from Netflix saying like, our prices are going up. And then like, who's canceling their subscription because that probably not such a big percentage of people, because like, what are we going to do? Not watch Netflix, right? Like it's, it's a service that we're using. So I think that there's something to be said for that approach. But yes, absolutely. Everyone has to find what feels like right to them.
I have one other way in which you can prevent this entirely. You all have contracts or agreements, is you can put it in the agreement that says, hey, like when this expires, you can expect a price increase or expect to have a different price conversation at this moment. So you can preemptively do it. So when it comes up, they've already signed the deal, right? And make note of it, right? It's just be able to articulate that and say that. So that's one way of like almost preventative care, is to pre-articulate that the next time these services get ramped up or re-signed or however you want to say it.
Yeah.
Heads up, FYI.
Yeah, no, that's really smart. What is like the one thing, if anyone listening to this, like what's the one most important thing that people can do after listening to this that can kind of move the needle on this whole discussion?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to stick with something I already alluded to, but never closed the loop on, which was budgets and wallets. So this concept of do I sell to a budget or do I sell to a wallet? I would say erase in your brain whether you sell to B2B or B2C or B2B to B2C, because it's all confusing. Just remember that there is a buyer behind all of this, and think of it in terms of, am I selling to somebody who is thinking about their wallet or somebody who's thinking about their budget? And even if you're selling to a business, right? You're selling your services to another business. That person may be a solo, or they may be a few individuals in their company. They're still thinking about their money in the business as it coming from their wallet. So it doesn't matter if they're B2B or B2C or whoever it is, that it's how do they think about their money? And so you want to frame your pricing as it relates to how they think about their money. Whereas like larger organizations and institutions, right? They have line items. They have budget items. They don't think about their money in the wallet. It is actually money already earmarked. It's not even their money. And so it's like, what I would say is, of all of the pricing elements, whether it's the price tag or the subtle nuances to increase the probability of pricing, what I would say is focus on framing, right? Framing the value of your pricing as it relates to whether they are buying from a budget or whether they are buying from a wallet. Think of it that way. And I think your conversations about pricing will be a little bit more supportive and beneficial to the conversation at hand.
Love it. Love it. If people are interested in talking to you, which they should, I think everyone listening should talk to Peter, how can they find you?
LinkedIn. That's the best way to find me. LinkedIn, send me a DM. We'll talk, we'll chat, we'll go down rabbit holes all day, every day. Yeah.
I highly recommend it. Also, Peter has an excellent newsletter, Substack. Is once a week you publish that, right?
Once a week. It's been 175 weeks in a row right now. That's one thing I like. Yeah.
Bonkers. I love it. Talk about consistency. Thank you so much. This was so enlightening, I think, for anyone listening. I think it's just a reframe of a lot of ideas that people have around pricing. Pricing is like really scary for a lot of people.
Yeah,
and I think you demystified a lot of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
All right, beautiful human. That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. This episode was brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, with music by Shmukulele and production by Podium Studios. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, hit subscribe, and don't forget to rate and review us. It really helps us grow and means the world. See you next time.